In 2021, Cadillac revealed the all-new Escalade, and boy, has it been a hit. Ever since these things first went on sale in August of 2020, they have consistently sold for at or well above their original MSRP, or manufacturer's suggested retail price. Now, this hasn't been all that uncommon in recent years because everything from the Honda Odyssey to the Cadillac Escalade have sold for over their original MSRP at one point or another. But what makes these Escalades so special is that even after 3 years, and some having upwards of 50,000 miles, these Cadillac Escalades are still selling for right around their original MSRP. This puts the Escalade in a very unique club with others like the Mercedes G-Wagon, BMW M-Cars, and the Porsche 911. But today I'm asking why. Why have these big, bulky American Escalades managed to completely ignore depreciation over the past few years? Well, I think the answer might surprise you. Today, I'm going to go on a thorough walk around of this Cadillac Escalade, and I think that you'll gain an understanding of why so many Americans can't wait to throw their money at these things. The first thing you'll probably notice about the Escalade is just how big it is. Now, the regular Escalade is already quite large, but this is an ESV version, meaning it's 15 inches longer than the regular one, making it a total of 17.5 feet long. Now, this obviously has several benefits like more legroom, more cargo room, better ride comfort, etc., but it also makes this Escalade extremely difficult to navigate around tight spaces. Another thing I really like about the front of this Escalade are the headlights because I think they flow really nicely with the rest of the vehicle. I also love the LED running lights on the front of this Escalade because I think they pay a nice little tribute to the classic Cadillac taillights of the 1950s. And speaking of those classic 1950s taillights, these are the taillights on the new Escalade. And while they're just basically a refreshed version of the old taillights on the previous generation of Escalade, I still think they look really good, and frankly, they still look just as modern as they did 10 years ago. And staying on the topic of taillights, Cadillac has placed little tiny Cadillac logos inside of these so that if you ever go and buy aftermarket ones, we'll all know. One other thing I want to mention about the exterior of this Escalade are the door handles. Now, you might be a little bit confused by that because these look like regular old door handles, but they're not, because when you go to pull on them, they don't move. So how do you actually get inside the car? Well, what you have to do is reach your hand on the inside of the door handle and push the little release button that's located there, and that's how you get inside. As we transition to the interior of this Escalade, the first thing you'll notice is just how spacious it is. Now, keep in mind, you literally cannot buy a German SUV that's as big as this thing, or really any other SUV that's as big as this thing, and that has a lot of benefits to it. For example, I am completely stretched out right now, and I am not sacrificing a single inch of rear seat legroom for the backseat passengers. I'm also completely spread out right now without intruding on the driver's personal space. When you combine all of that, it's just a really comfortable ride, frankly, and I can see myself sitting here for hours upon hours on a road trip. Now, you can't talk about the interior of this Escalade without first talking about all the screens because there are 5 of them. Now, I'll get into what each one of them does later, but the thing I want to note about them is the fact that they flow really nicely together. They're very elegantly designed overall, which is something that a lot of other manufacturers can't say when they throw a bunch of screens on the inside of their cars. So what exactly do all of these screens do inside of this Escalade? Well, let's start with the biggest one first because it contains the infotainment system. It's going to allow you to see all of your driver stats, your navigation, your media, etc. Then you move down below that and you've got all of your climate controls located there. Now, normally I wouldn't really point out a screen for the climate controls because it's not that big of a deal, but this is quite a premium screen. Even though it's showing the most basic information like temperature and airflow amount and that sort of thing, it does so in a really classy way, and I'll try to leave a little clip so that you see what I'm talking about. Moving on to the instrument cluster, it has a couple of different settings. The main one is going to obviously be your basic driving information like your speed, your revs, your mileage, all of that sort of thing. But you also have a few other settings built in there as well. For example, you can display your navigation screen in your gauge cluster, freeing up your infotainment system, which is a nice feature. But you also have an augmented reality navigation function. What it is it uses your front camera on this Escalade, and it's going to actually show you in real time a picture of the road with arrows pointing to where exactly you're supposed to turn, which is a really modern feature that I haven't seen on too many cars. Now, some Escalades have night vision for the gauge cluster. This one does not, but I will leave a picture of that up now so you can get an idea of what it looks like. But the main thing to take away from all of this is this Cadillac is extremely configurable on the inside, which is something we haven't seen from them in the past. The fifth and final screen I want to talk about is this one right here. Now I know what you're thinking. What are you talking about, Zach? That's your rearview mirror. Well, yes it is, but it's also a rearview camera, and it uses the cameras mounted to the back of this Escalade to give you a lot better visibility when you're traveling down the highway. Now, this has become a pretty common feature in a lot of GM cars, but I still want to talk about it because it's a really nice feature that I wish more automakers would use. Another thing worth mentioning is the sound system in this Escalade, because it has a total of 36 speakers. Some are in your headrest, some are in your seats, some are in the dash, some are in the ceiling. They're a little bit of everywhere, but it all combines to make a really great sound experience. Now, the steering wheel on this Escalade is fairly basic. You know, it's going to contain most of the buttons you've come to expect on a luxury steering wheel, like your volume controls, your media controls, your cruise control settings, your adaptive cruise control settings, your heated steering wheel. But there's one button in particular that I want to make note of, and it's this one right here to the left that has a little ear on it. Whenever you press that little button with the ear on it, it's going to enhance your voice. But what in the world does that even mean? Well, what it means is it's going to use a little microphone mounted somewhere up here, and it's going to project your voice throughout the cabin. So even if you're at the very back of this enormously long Escalade, you're still going to be able to hear my voice just fine. Moving on to the back of this Escalade, you're still surrounded in extreme comfort and extreme luxury, just like in the front. You get your own set of climate controls with that same great climate control screen that I mentioned earlier, a full thing of cup holders, USB and USB-C ports, and even an HDMI port back here. You also get two really large screens back here that are touchscreen and allow you to do everything from play your PlayStation, program the GPS, look at the radio, and all sorts of other great features as well. And check out how much legroom I have back here, because I'm about 6 feet tall, and this is where I would normally sit when I'm driving this Escalade, and yet I still have more than enough legroom back here. And despite having all that legroom in the front, all that legroom in the second row, and all that legroom in the third row, you still have this much cargo space back here. And that's a big reason why so many people are obsessed with these things, because you can throw a whole army of people in here, still sit comfortably, and still have room for all of their luggage at the end of the day. And so whenever you combine the practicality with the roominess and the luxury and the features and everything else that makes these Escalades so special, you begin to understand why so many Americans cannot wait to throw their money at these things.